work for. So this is a kind of oppression, where those who have been given more by God use that as a means of having the upper hand on others, keeping others in a lower situation. Not only do you have to work to pay back what you borrowed, but to work extra to pay him back for the fact that he lent you money. So that is the opposite of charity. You see how that is opposite? Because charity would entail that he lends you the 2,000, and he says at the end, well, you know, what's 2,000 pounds to me? You know, I've got 2 million anyway, so 2,000 is only a small fraction. Take the 2,000. You need a car, I buy you the car. Or if he doesn't buy you the car, he doesn't give you the entire 2,000, but he takes less than the 2,000 back. He says, okay, I lent you 2,000, but if you pay me 1,800 back, that will be fine. Because 200, you know, is peanuts to me. All right? Or if he at least takes what he has loaned, isn't that enough? That would be an act of charity. He loaned it to you, he had it, it was his possession, and he loaned it to you because you were in difficulty, and he just took back what he loaned you. So that's enough. So for him to take extra, that is the opposite of charity. Charity in the Islamic faith requires, as we've already spoken about, that the well-to-do should give out of the surplus of their wealth to those who do not have sufficient. That's charity. And interest is taking from those who don't have sufficient and putting that into the coffers of those who have an overabundance. That's the opposite. So that's why we can see that the interest has been prohibited. And because it is prohibited for one to receive it or to take it and to eat it, the Islamic law also prohibits the Muslims from giving it, so that the whole system can be brought to nothing. If there's no one to give it, then obviously no one can take it. But some leniency can be envisioned in the case where one is forced to give, because it's not originally, that which is forbidden is not the giving, it is the taking. And giving becomes forbidden because it's an accessory to the fact. But one might be forced to give in the case where one cannot help it and one does not have a better outcome, but to take a loan on interest. So the economic situation is also governed by the Islamic faith. And one, I think finally I should mention before I take your questions, is the political aspect. Islam also regulates the politics of the state. And again, this is where Islam might seem to be so different and odd, because modern nation states that are post-Christian have come a long way now to be freed from the shackles of the church. And now they're wondering, can we go back to thinking about the possibility of a nation state being governed by religious principles? Well, we mentioned previously the reason why people have gone away from letting religion regulate their lives in such a comprehensive fashion. But we might elaborate on it some more, especially with reference to the fact that some religions do not have much to say about these aspects of life. For example, the political aspect of our existence. Some other religions hardly have anything to say about this. But the Islamic faith does have something to say. Both the Quran and the life example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, demonstrate that the way in which communities organize themselves and the way they're going to deal with each other, with other such communities, involve codes of conduct. And the code for Muslim conduct is already being spelled out in terms of the Islamic faith. One of the misunderstood aspects of Islam, and we'll have a chance to talk more about some of the misunderstood features of the Islamic faith, is this term jihad, which means to struggle. That can take many different forms. It can be a personal struggle to overcome one's evil desires. It can take the form of community effort to resist evil and to work for a betterment in community. It could be the kind of work that we talked about for environmentalism and for animal rights. That too is a jihad, a struggle to bring about betterment. But it could also take a military form. Now the military jihad is in fact a political matter. Every nation state would have an army that would protect the interests of that state, whether to protect their ownership of certain lands or to protect the safety of their citizens, and especially the latter. Nobody sees that this is a bad thing, to have such an army to protect the interests of the state. At the time of the formation of the first Islamic State, the situation was such that the land was divided and people were divided along religious lines. So the Muslim community was not only a nation state, but it was also a religious community. Nowadays you have nation states that are not divided along religious lines, but you have the armies for the state. In a similar way, the early Muslim people, as a community, were a nation state, and naturally they would have an army as well. So engaging in a military confrontation that would be called jihad, that was quite a legitimate activity. The kinds of things that persist to this day. Confusion arises because some Muslims, reading the passages in the Quran that speak of this, think that that applies to them as persons, as individuals, not realizing that there are some regulations in the Quran, such as this, which actually are directed at the nation state and the heads of the state. It is the responsibility of the head of the state to call for a military campaign, and to appoint the persons who will go forward in that military campaign. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the head of the Muslim state at the time, would take out his army, and when they have reached the outskirts of the city, he would inspect the army, because people would come joining from all sides. And now, when he's outside of the city, this is where he can have a clear picture who is in the army and who is not. And then he would inspect the ranks, and he would disqualify some people. For example, a man who is too young to participate in this battle. Because some people trying to participate in the battle may serve to be a liability. Sometimes he disqualified people because their faith wavered, and they would not be obviously strong in battle and holding their position. We don't want people in the battle who are going to be weaklings or who will abandon their comrades in battle. They have to fight like Spartans. Every man in his place, and he holds his position no matter what. Because only then does the entire army become a formidable force. So it cannot be a situation where every individual picks up whatever tool he can find or weapon he can find, and then he rushes and helter-skelter in every direction and tries to blow something up or blow himself up. That is not the way in which it was envisioned, that which is called jihad. Now someone might say, but isn't the Quran speaking to me? Yes, but the Quran gives certain rules which are to be implemented by the state authorities. And if individuals were to take that into their own hands, they would create chaos. Think about, for example, the laws against criminal activity in the Quran, the hudud laws. Those cannot be implemented by individuals. You cannot go say, okay, I found an adulterer, okay, I'm going to give him the Islamic penalty. Or I found a thief, I'm going to cut off his hand. Or whatever. That's for the state to govern. That person has to be charged with a crime. He has to be brought in front of the Islamic judge. And then the judge has to decide whether the amount that was stolen, for example, is an amount for which the Islamic penalty would be justifiable. It might be something minor, and you do not give the Islamic penalty for that. So one who's reading the Quran would read, "As-sariqu was-sariqatu faqtahu aydiyahuma." The thief, male or female, cut their hands. Taken literally, it's like every thief, male or female, for everything called stealing. But the Islamic law is more detailed than this. The Quran has put